Welcome back, YouTube. Today I'm joined by exercise scientist, bodybuilding coach, and most importantly, the man behind some of the best physiques out of Australia and out of the world, to be honest, Dean McKillop. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Eugene, mate. It's a pleasure.
It's good to have you here. Today, we are going to talk all about supplements. So I want to run through, honestly, as many supplements as we can and understand where these may fit in the course of helping people achieve better health outcomes, better performance outcomes, and for you as a coach, how you go about deciding if something is worthwhile using or maybe a bit more experimental that you still might use as well. Mm-hmm. And of course, we can't forget about the supplements that are probably just nobody should be touching, but are still on the market. Although we're going to talk about the fun stuff too as well if we've got time for that.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So to begin with, I guess, how do you go about deciding what supplements are worth your attention?
Oh, I think the most important thing is to ensure that they are at least supplements that cause no harm. So that means we have to have at least some research to suggest that the efficacy of them is good, but also then that the risk profile of them is low. Mm-hmm. And I think for supplements, the name says it itself, like they are there to supplement a nutrition plan or an exercise program or whatever it may be. So I'm choosing things that typically will be holes within a nutrition plan, even if it's like a really well-balanced one. So we're trying to like plug holes with actual supplements.
Right.
Supplement the diet, mate.
Yeah. And I mean, where do you start with that? Because for me personally, I'd go to things, protein is an obvious one if protein is lacking, which we can come back to in a sec as well. But I look at things like magnesium and vitamin D, maybe zinc, based on blood work. But where do you go?
They're my three go-tos pretty much.
Okay,
and on top of that, I'd probably do fish oil.
Okay, yes, of course, yeah.
Not because it's not possible to get it from food, but it's generally not consistently seen in at least my guys and girls, and that is that fish intake is not something that happens on a daily or regular basis, and it's also quite costly.
Yeah.
So I think supplementing with some fish oil is probably a smart idea from an essential fatty acid perspective.
So let's talk about these three for you, or these four for you. Magnesium, what is it about it that makes it so vital that you go to a lot with clients?
Yeah. Commonly seen to be the one thing that is like traditionally or consistently deficient, especially even with nutrition. Like the capacity to get in the requisite amount of magnesium from food is very difficult. You're going to be eating bags and bags of spinach, you know? I can't actually remember the exact milligrams, but I think it's in the vicinity or something of like the case of like about a kilogram of spinach a day will give you the sufficient amount of magnesium for the athletic population.
Right.
So yeah, I'm usually putting that in.
What kind of dosage is required for the athletic population? How does that differ from the just health conscious everyday lifter?
So I will usually start people out relatively on the lower end because you have the consideration too with, first and foremost, most of the time when supplementing magnesium, I'm going to go for something that's like chelated. So it's going to be like a biglycinate or an actual just chelate or an orotate, maybe a citrate if somebody is using those, but you have to be a little bit more mindful of it because the osmotic effect it has on the stomach and the GI can cause you to go to the bathroom relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So that'll be like somewhere in the sort of like 200 milligrams starting dose, but I generally will try and work people up to around about the 400 to 600 milligrams as a minimum effective dose for supplements. And that would be spread out across the course of the day.
Yep. And maybe some clients or people, depending on needs where it may go higher, would you verify this through blood work or?
Yeah, generally. I mean, most of the time blood work from a magnesium perspective is still going to sit within range, but I think it's fair to assume based on like the athletic population's demands for carbohydrate metabolism and performance and all the rest of it, that generally they'll need a little bit more. And there's no major detriment, at least that I'm aware of, to having slightly higher magnesium intakes. So I'd rather err on the side of caution, knowing that the consequence is a low risk profile.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's very affordable as a supplement. It's cheap. It's easy to come by. It's not something you got to specially order. Even these chelated versions, which for those of you who aren't aware, chelated means it's bound to an amino acid to help with the transport and absorption of it. And depending on which amino acids it's attached to, that helps with its absorption in certain tissues. Is that correct?
Yeah, and also just to pass through the GI, I believe, where it's like so readily broken down.
Yeah. What would you look out for to tell you that someone's hit that happy limit for you? Like, are you looking at they say they're sleeping better, the performance is better?
If it was introduced for the very specific purpose of supporting sleep, then I would like to see whether or not those sleep scores and or even perceived sleep quality has gone up. That would for sure be a marker of like reference point, I guess you could say. But otherwise, for me, magnesium is typically one that's being plugged in on this is likely going to be beneficial to you. Like we know it's involved in so many hundreds of processes, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be possible for someone to specifically analyze whether or not it's doing exactly as it should.
Yes.
But we know that it has the benefits, and like you said, it's easily available and it's cheap, and so put it in.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where we have this bread here. I don't know if you come across it ever. From a very specialized gluten-free spot, they use sprouted chickpeas, which is very, very high in magnesium, and it gives you like 500 milligrams of magnesium from just a couple of slices.
Yeah, I think this is a bread that Ben Cart likes as
yes,
well.
Yes, he got me onto it for the magnesium, and I started having it, and he was like, okay, because you do that, Eugene, you don't need to worry about having magnesium. I said, I don't care. I'm still going to have the magnesium on top of it, and I'll still double dose the magnesium just because I know that it's probably not going to hurt me apart from my bank account.
Yeah.
And I just like that insurance, but I'm not, I get tested for my magnesium once a year at most, a red blood cell magnesium test, and it's normally, it's on a good spot. But I just figure it's probably a good thing to just have in general.
Yeah.
Where, as far as we know, as you say, do no harm with this kind of stuff. It's very hard to do harm with magnesium, isn't it?
Other than to make you go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Which could be a pro or a con depending on the person's situation.
Yeah. I do remember actually took, what was it, milk of magnesium. I can't remember what type that is, but that's literally used to just evacuate everything.
Yeah, I've used magnesium citrate for the exact reason for somebody who was struggling to go to the bathroom before a contest preparation.
Right.
Like the night before a show, they're a bit nervous, they're a little bit amped up, and we're trying to bring that nervous system down, let their bowels release. Like, magnesium citrate will do this without any kind of concern for then using something like a suppository or something that may also then drive a level of dehydration that isn't suitable at that time. So
I guess magnesium is like a good starting place for us to look at supplements, saying that's something where just about everybody could take it and they see some benefits from it. They may not necessarily feel like hopped up like you would on caffeine, but it's a no-brainer supplement where there's very low risk profile, very high benefits across so many different potential aspects of your biology. And that's where something like your zinc and vitamin D would fall into as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the problem with these, and I think everybody, like sexy cells, right? But the problem with vitamin D, although vitamin D, I would say you could probably notice a fairly significant shift if you're quite deficient in regards to just general vitality and how you feel.
Yeah.
But they're not vitamins or minerals that are going to do anything for you acutely.
Yes.
Like, the effect is fantastic long term, but that sort of like secondary side effect that a lot of people chase isn't necessarily doing anything to the point that you'll notice it, so that you'll feel like it's doing what it should.
Yeah.
But you just don't have to trust that it is, and it's good for you.
That's the worst part, isn't it? Because especially in the sports world, we can take things like beta-alanine, where you're going to feel it. Even just caffeine, you're going to feel it. Well, most people should feel, unless if you're just always using it, then you feel nothing.
Yeah.
But a magnesium, you're not going to feel. Vitamin D, you're not going to feel. Even though, like, I'll go through winter and my vitamin D plummets being here in Melbourne. And I'll test that and I'll say, wow, it's like in the gutter. Oh, that's why I'm so depressed all the time. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sad.
But to be perfectly honest, like, whether it's high or low, I don't feel a big difference. That I can objectively say, yes, this must be the vitamin D.
Again, like its effect is long term, right? Like, it's not acute. Even the accumulation of it from a bloodstream perspective, or blood plasma level, is going to take time.
Yeah.
And even for that, like if somebody was to get a blood test on that, I've seen pretty consistent numbers in regards to like how you can escalate that at about 1,000 IU per 10 points on a blood score. So like if you're significantly under, you can just shift it up 1,000 IU a day on average, and you'll see that go up about 10 points.
Yeah. Now with zinc, that's something that I used to be very big on, because there was a time where it was so much research, so many people talking about saying it's a test booster, essentially. Like, it's so important for hormone production and testosterone specifically. And me being, 19-year-old bodybuilder Eugene, I was like, fuck yeah, give me all the zinc. And I was taking somewhere in the vicinity of like 60 to 90 milligrams a day, which is a very, very high dose. But I thought, up the dose, lift the most, like most things. But there's dangers to that as well. I think zinc is a more unique one in terms of the minerals, where it can have other competing effects with copper. Have you ever come across anything like that, or with people?
I have not pushed people into the zone of potential concern. That one for me has always been a bit of a plug and play on low dose as well, for that very reason. And
yes.
That, we're going to see some benefit. I deal with a lot of, actually, you could look at this two ways. I deal with a lot of pharmacologically enhanced bodybuilders.
Yes.
So the discussion around zinc for hormone production is pretty negligible.
Yep.
They're already sorting that out.
Yeah.
But then some people will think, just because I'm also then putting hormones in, it's still beneficial for me to have more, and they will do the exact same thing to use your approach, which was up the dose, lift the most.
Up the dose, lift the most.
Yeah. You know, so, but I've always plugged it sort of like at 50 and below, usually.
Yep.
So I haven't run into the toxicity concerns, thankfully.
Yes.
So like you said, copper's the one to be mainly mindful of, I believe.
Yeah, it was so strange. 'Cause I was getting all kinds of, I guess, weird symptoms, where I was getting very strange sleep disturbances, a lot of allergy kind of issues, a lot of strange rashes, and it was all just kind of unexplainable. And then I eventually got some quite extensive blood work done, and I found my zinc was super, super high, my copper was super low. Something was off about my iron. I can't remember what it was. But all these things like, oh, okay, probably taking, double the triple the amount of zinc you should be taking is not a good idea. And you're doing it just because.
I mean, I see this regularly recommended at 100.
Yep.
So like even at 60 to 90 for you is doing that kind of thing. That's the thing. It can happen quite quickly.
Yeah. It's a big thing where I think people see a lot of these supplements, like we've spoken about magnesium, it's hard to overdo it. And I really do believe in that. Vitamin D, it's possible, but it is also quite hard, especially given how deficient a lot of people are. But zinc, people wouldn't think of these things as potentially dangerous, but it depends on how you use it, I guess, where it's in the dose.
Yeah. The devil's in the dose.
Yeah. Are there any other supplements that you would see as something that most people should be taking? We have good evidence for, low risk profile.
Well, I said fish oil before, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's less to do with, I suppose, fish oil itself and more to do with the active constituents within it that are positive, the EPA and the DHA. So the polyunsaturated fatty acids. You can get these from your diet, and omega-3s obviously too. You can get them from your diet, so it's technically not necessary to supplement it. But especially again in my population, where one of the greatest risk profiles for long-term disease is heart health and arterial health, managing things like cholesterol via like the introduction of like higher intakes of the, what do we call that, PUFAs and MUFAs?
Yeah.
Which sounds ridiculous, is incredibly advantageous.
Yeah.
And I've seen direct response to like high dose versions of those for individuals that do have like a hereditary predisposition for high cholesterol. So I really like that. I think the research on it varies depending on sort of the quantities as well. Like
Yes.
Usually speaking, I would say like if you're in the vicinity of around about like 2.5 grams of active constituent EPA DHA per day, you're in a really good zone. And then that will cover off at about the equivalent of, I think it's around about 100 to 120 grams of like salmon if you were to consume that a day.
Yeah.
Which I was saying before, like not everyone's doing 120
Yeah.
grams of salmon a day. Ben Kahn actually had like a really cool rule for that. I think it was like a 7 and 7, 7 serves of fish oil a week versus 7 serves of fish, and you could pretty much change them one for one.
Yeah. Is there anything to watch out for when it comes to sourcing some of these supplements?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one because obviously you can have fairly low grade fish oil that can go with high likelihood of like rancidity. That'd be a correct word. I like a website called Labdoor.
Oh, okay. That's the one that does the testing.
Yeah, independent
yeah.
of third-party testing, so you know that you're at least going to get what you're asking for.
Yeah.
And then the cool thing is when you purchase through them, the money goes back into Labdoor to do more research.
Yeah.
Thorne in Australia is very good.
Yes.
I'm not as familiar with as many brands here in Australia now because I haven't looked into the supplement industry for quite some time, having not been here for 3 years, but they're very good, yeah.
Yeah. What other resources do you have when it comes to looking up supplements? Where do you go?
From an education perspective, quick grab, examine.com is still, I think, really fantastic. They do a very good job of compiling the research, which I think is good.
Yeah. So I guess that covers off, what we've spoken about, I guess, that comes up for me a lot is creatine. You use creatine, I'm guessing, with most of your people?
Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Not as cheap as it used to be, but still pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So I suppose like those ones we mentioned before are like really like health driven.
Yes. Yeah.
Creatine being both performance, but also now like health driven too.
Totally.
Again, probably similar to vitamin D3 as well.
Yeah.
Similar in that not very deficient. That's probably incorrect language. Deficient in most individuals. They're not going to consume enough creatine from their food, and it's very easy just to supplement once a day.
Yeah. Yeah, and you use 5 milligrams.
Yeah,
5 grams. Sorry.
Yeah.
5 milligrams is nothing.
Yeah, better than none, but not quite enough.
Yeah, 5 grams, monohydrate. All the other ones just kind of, there's not much going for them, is there?
No, man, there's nothing to suggest that any of the other derivatives of creatine are better, at least in driving creatine saturation within muscle tissue.
Yeah.
You could maybe argue if somebody has digestive stress from creatine monohydrate that they could see benefit in the ones that are a little bit more water soluble. But I mean, you're clutching at straws.
Yeah.
You could also probably just have the creatine on a full stomach.
Yeah, totally.
And I say that very condescendingly. You could definitely do that.
Yeah, just do that, people. Do that. So I guess, I mean, that kind of brings us into looking at maybe some of these more performance-based supplements. So creatine's a big one. Caffeine is another obvious one that I know you love as much as me with coffee.
Undeniable.
That would be. Now, I think, have we spoken about this before? I can't remember. Or maybe someone else. I personally cycle my caffeine intake. Not specifically saying 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, but I'm very mindful of not having more than a few days in a row where I'll have a caffeinated coffee, and then I'll take time to try to wash it out. And I personally notice a significant increase in my sensitivity and how much I feel from it. Did we speak about this in the past maybe?
I want to say that we spoke about it briefly on our podcast, but because at the time you were pretty much on green tea only, I think.
Yeah.
And then you'd mentioned that you'd had a coffee and you were quite amped.
Look at me now.
Yeah, watch me go.
Now I've got a coffee machine.
Oh, wow.
Fucked.
Dad life, you see.
Exactly. You got to get through like that first year. It's just living on caffeine.
That's your equivalent of the wine. You know,
Yes.
The 5 o'clock wine, the wind down wine.
Absolutely. This is the wind up. Just get me going. I can't remember what we spoke about back then in terms of it, but what do you do with caffeine? Because you love coffee.
Yeah.
You love caffeine as a supplement, obviously.
Well, I would say I love coffee more than I love caffeine. But by default of loving coffee, I have to consume caffeine. Well, I don't have to nowadays. You can get pretty good caffeinated coffee.
Decaf. So some of the best coffee I've had is decaf.
Yeah. I mean, there's new processes now that don't water it down, so it's great. I'm also probably not a significant caffeine consumer anymore because I enjoy my coffee in the morning and then I don't typically have a lot other than outside of that. Maybe 150 milligrams occasionally for training.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly advantageous to cycle it, whether that's a period on followed by a period off, like, 4 to 6 weeks on and then 1 to 2 weeks off, or it's maybe even like a really targeted approach to caffeine at the back end of like a training mesocycle where you need the extra oomph, probably a very smart approach. Or if you take your approach, 3 days on, 4 days on, 3 to 4 days off, you'll certainly see an increase in sensitivity to that side effect of energy. But again, like I was at the beginning, I was talking about like the effect that you get and then the side effect. I mean, they're both side effects, but I like to think of them as like one's positive and one's negative. The effect you're chasing and then the side effect that you like or dislike being a bad one. The effect from a performance perspective, as far as I understand, is still pretty good, even in the absence of the perceived like mental energy. So if you were to give somebody 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram for an event of like a performance event, regardless of if they've done that consistently or habitually, they should still get performance enhancement from it. They just won't really feel it.
Right.
But I personally think that placebo, whether it's placebo or even not, the expectation of oomph, like the beta-alanine tingles, has to be performance driving, unless you're somebody prone to anxiety, of course.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I mean, I see more advantages to cycling it than to not cycling it. I just, like, it's a drug, so people find that very difficult.
I know, it's... It does boggle my mind sometimes, just the fact that people don't... I don't want to sound like I'm on my high horse, I don't drink caffeine all the time. But it is a drug, and it is something that you can get... I don't want to say a dependency. I mean, people aren't going on a street corner sucking dick for the next shot of coffee. It's a little bit less edgy than that. But it is something where it does have a very known response and you can get habituation towards it. And you get, I guess, some kind of dependency where are you taking the caffeine now because you want that boost, or are you taking it because, when you don't take it, you feel like absolute shit? And you can't do anything.
The absence of caffeine is the problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to say that there's a level of like physical withdrawal to that, or an inability for you to function without it. So like, there's certainly elements of it that I guess that are addictive-like or like addiction-like. Yes, no one's sucking dick for caffeine.
Yeah, not yet.
I mean, maybe. Depends how good the
we
coffee
don't know.
is.
Yeah, we have.
That hardcore Koopy Luwak or whatever it's called. That people
the
may
civet
chase.
pooped out from that Himalayan monkey or something. Yeah, got to get me some of that.
Yeah. What an unusual concept.
Yeah. We don't need to dig into that one too much. Not today, people, not today. No. It is something where like I've personally found I must be getting older. I must be more sleep deprived. I must not be taking care of my health as well, which makes a lot of sense in the past year having a newborn. But when I have those couple of days on caffeine, I feel it. When I have maybe up to a week, because I'm pushing a bit more where I have caffeine, and then even just that 7-day period, when I stop for a couple of days, I feel it bad.
It's worse.
Yeah, I feel it. Whereas I used to be like, I come off and be fine. Have you got any strategies that you've used in the past when it comes to cycling caffeine on and off? Apart from titrate down, like I just would say.
Well, this is the unfortunate reality. Is if you wanted to eradicate that negative side effect to not having it, you would have to also then not take it as frequently.
Yes.
So you'd probably just have some very hard and fast rules about quantity of milligrams of caffeine per day and frequency of use. And I think if you can maybe use it as a performance tool and disassociate it from something you do daily, because I think this is half the problem with coffee intake, is that there's a social element to coffee.
Yes.
There's like even the smell of coffee has very particular effects on people and how they feel, like memories and all the rest of it. I think there's even some links to it improving things like Alzheimer's.
Really?
Yeah, but it's mainly because of that olfactory response and how strong it is for memory and cognition. Like, you hear, that might be an older person who smelled it, and they go, I remember when I smelled that coffee back in Italy when I was 22,
Right.
And it's like, whoa, this is like a pretty cool ingredient.
Yes.
But you would have to have some hard and fast rules. As somebody who used to consume quite a lot of coffee, because I just genuinely loved coffee, and has used in the vicinity of 900 milligrams in one go for a caffeine study. Yeah. I used to think I was relatively immune to the stimulant effects of it, but having now had a lot less of it, every time that I ever have more, it's super noticeable. Yeah. So yeah, I guess for me, it would be just not overdoing it. I like your approach. I think the other best approach for me would be probably, I kind of like, actually I like this approach with performance enhancing drugs. I like this approach with training, which is get the most out of the least. Right. So that you can add a little bit more in later to get more out of a little bit more. Yeah. And I would use caffeine like that from a performance perspective for my guys. Like, hey, you're entering into the back end of a contest preparation. You're going to be quite hungry and tired. Now's the time that we might want to titrate caffeine momentarily. Yeah. Similarly, at the back of a training mesocycle, you're struggling to get a little bit stronger. Let's titrate caffeine up here and try and get a little bit more performance. But the beautiful thing is once they get through that mesocycle of training, they go to like a deload phase. You don't need caffeine for that performance because it's by default subpar. Yeah. So you can eradicate it then and just deal with it. Yeah. But yeah, you're going to have to just be okay with being a little tired.
I've tried so hard to try to find different things, like whether it was B vitamins. I think I didn't even know why, but I used carnitine at one point, trying to find whatever I could to buffer that negative response when I first stopped using caffeine like 10 odd years ago, because I got such bad withdrawals over time. And yeah, I've yet to find anything.
Not meth, maybe?
I haven't tried that. Do you know a guy?
I mean, yeah, that part. I mean, if you think about it, like the pathway that you are seeking is only stimulated in the same manner, right? Yes. I mean, maybe you could use something that could try and actually a novel ingredient, and we were talking about supplements, one that may be suitable for something like that, but isn't definitely not well elucidated in the research, is an ingredient. I believe it's 9-MBC.
9-MBC. Never heard of that.
It, I think, is like a dopaminergic resensitizing sort of ingredient. It's used a lot in the sort of like nootropic world. Okay. But do not quote me on its efficacy. Yeah. I think that's in there. That would be one. There's a couple of, actually, you know what might be an interesting novel ingredient would be, it's of the same family as caffeine, but it doesn't habituate.
Teocrine?
Teocrine.
Yeah. John Meadows is talking about that. And I don't understand why that hasn't become mainstream.
Look, to be honest, back when I worked in the supplement industry, however long ago that was, 8 years ago, it was building some real popularity.
It would have been about 8 years ago when I first heard of it, because John was using one of his supplements.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still around. Maybe it's not available in Australia, not allowed. I don't know. There was a trademarked version of it at one stage. Like it was. Yeah.
I just remember, relatively recently, the last couple of years, Googling it because I remembered about it. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that ingredient. Not to be mistaken with theanine, people who are watching. No. It is slightly different, significantly different.
Maybe use it at the opposite ends of time.
Yeah. I couldn't find much. There's not many companies making it as a thing. It's not used in a lot. I was like, this is strange, because I just remember it being very promising as a caffeine substitute.
I want to say the company was called Compound Solutions, who controlled the rights to Teocrine TM.
Right, interesting.
So I wonder if they're still around and it's still a thing, or if,
Yeah, something to dig into, I guess, yeah. Because, that was an interesting supplement. Yeah. And I guess, we're going to probably leapfrog a little bit, because I do want to talk a bit more about a couple of other potential performance enhancing supplements you might use, the legal ones anyway.
Yes.
Before we get to the illegal ones, but we're going down this rabbit hole now. Let's go with it, like the nootropics or the supplements that may have less efficacy around them. Are there any supplements that are interesting to you in that realm? Not nootropics specifically, but supplements that don't have the best backing behind them just yet, like a caffeine or a creatine or a zinc.
In the performance realm?
Yeah, like for yourself, or for performance, health, maybe, I guess, anything supplement related. What sparked your curiosity as a nerd?
I'll put one out there that I found incredibly effective, but isn't necessarily itself well studied, but its active constituent is understood well. And that would be red rice yeast extract, more specifically monocolin K.
Right. This is for the health benefits.
Yeah. So monocolin K, I believe, is like chemically or structurally pretty similar to a statin. So for any individual where we've attempted dietary intervention, cardiorespiratory intervention, fat loss intervention, you name it, to try and decrease their LDL cholesterol, and it's shown no real benefit, and there's seemingly like a hereditary issue there. That, when standardized at anywhere between 5 and 10 milligrams a day, has been incredibly effective at dropping LDL to below 2.5 nmols per deciliter.
I've never heard, like, I've used red yeast extract in the past because I've got that exact issue.
Right.
Hereditary high cholesterol, high LDL, despite, having very robust cardiovascular health, not abusing or using any kinds of drugs or anything like that. And it's always something, having a good diet as well.
Yeah.
So I've tried red yeast rice, but not this specific compound, I'm guessing.
That's the biggest issue with red rice is a non-standardized amount of active constituent monocolin K.
Okay.
So you need to find one that actually has that standardized.
Yeah.
And 5 to 10 milligrams will usually do the job.
What do you use? What brand? So I can just Google.
Well, this is difficult because it's consistently like one of those things that disappears on the market, and in Australia even more difficult.
Why
like,
is that?
I don't know.
Because it's not like an illegal. It's not going to give you a third testicle.
No,
or
one you can definitely use, but it's just going to be expensive for people to get in Australia. Is Supplement Needs cardiovascular stack, CV stack from Dean St. Mark.
Yeah.
He has, I believe, 10 milligrams of monocolin K in there.
Okay.
In one of them. So he has the CV stack, and then he has another like heart stack. I can't remember which one's which. One of them is just your general stuff like CoQ10 and all of those basics. And then the other one is specifically monocolin K.
Yeah.
And I've seen that thing drop real quick.
Wow.
Doesn't come without consequence of like maybe like some fatigue and stuff like that if you're like sensitive to statins, if you've ever used them. But it's been like, I think, like a nicer like introduction to those. And if that has no benefit, then it's off to the doctor.
Yeah.
Of
course.
Because whatever perceived negative side effects may be occurring from statins are not as bad as that what we know of with
death,
long-term LDL, high LDL. So
absolutely. How quickly would you see a response, and would you then stop it and then see that it is maintained after?
6 weeks.
Right.
It's pretty quick.
And you pull it out and it's
and then
sustained.
I would reduce and see if we can sustain, or I would start low and titrate up to effect. I wouldn't say that it is sustained in the absence of it, though, for most people, if they've got like a legitimate hereditary issue.
Of course, that would make sense. Yeah.
It's a lifetime commitment, that one. But I mean, I've seen it literally as strong as taking someone's LDL to sub 1. And I was like, oh, we don't need that much.
Yeah.
Or it might be like a similar to the caffeine concept. It's like 4 to 6 weeks on, about a month off.
Right.
Reestablish, go again, see how much you can tolerate.
Yeah.
Or how frequently you have to take it out.
You see, I think we spoke a little bit about this off camera yesterday. My thing, and I want you to tell me that I'm wrong and I'm stupid for thinking this way. When it comes to supplements, I have a hard time justifying them sometimes because I know I'm not always living my life in the optimal environment because, I've got a 1-year-old at home. I'm not sleeping. I'm under a lot of stress. I'm not always eating my meals, not training the way that I'd like to. Everything is a bit all over the shop the past year. So I'm like, I don't want to add an extra supplement in just to mask my shitty lifestyle habits, which I know is probably not a smart way to look about it, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you're not prepared to change your lifestyle habits and you can actually stem the bleeding with an easy introduction of a supplement, to me, that sounds like a smart choice.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the long-term approach.
Of course.
Obviously we're saying like maybe don't eat the cake forever.
Yes.
But if you're going to eat cake for a while, we could at least stem the bleeding. I think this is kind of like, you have an alcoholic who's not willing to give up the alcohol. Should they not take things to maybe support their liver health? Like,
True.
you know what? You should probably try and dampen the effect.
Yeah.
Not to suggest that obviously your lifestyle is having great detriment to your health, but I think if it's an easy introduction, it's a low barrier to entry. I mean, I'm pretty similar. I think the difference is the mindset between I shouldn't take supplements to optimize in an environment that I'm not optimizing for.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Like, but they're the supplements that we're kind of thinking like maybe it gives me 1%. Like it might work.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about things like this, like if you do have hereditary LDL, then why wouldn't you is the question.
That's true.
You know?
That's true.
Or like, what have you got to lose? So
Yeah.
I would introduce it in that instance.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, like I bring it up to you because I need that extra push because I know it's an illogical thought process. And I know that it's not a healthy one that I have because a big part of it is my own personal bias. When I was young, I was on the huge Charles Poliquin bandwagon where I had a fucking cabinet filled with every single botanical herb supplement you could think of to optimize every little thing because I thought, wow, this drank the Kool-Aid kind of thing. And I want to get as far away from that as possible from my own upbringing, I guess, my own trauma, in inverted commas. So, yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people would have a similar kind of fear around supplements. Like, hey, you know, just get your life in order first.
Well, do you think it's also like the use of a supplement to band-aid poor lifestyle choices, just for ease of use of language, is the admission of poor lifestyle choices? And people maybe have too much pride to do that? Because like you probably think, I know that the best course of action is actually just to sort my shit out.
Yes.
And if I use supplements, I'm saying to myself, it's okay not to sort my shit out. I'll just use these supplements, which then is an admission of the fact that you're not doing the best that you possibly can.
We
So
are
like-
getting fucking
Like, do you know what I
deep.
mean? Like maybe it's a confirmation.
Holy shit.
Because I
was
reckon
not
I would be like
expecting
that.
this today.
That's what,
I love the buffer. Like that's how I would be, you know. Just if it was me, you're fucked.
no, but I think that actually would be me. You know, I'm like, well, what's the point? You know, you should just be better.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, you know, so I'd rather just live with my head a little bit in the sand. You know, like,
Oh wow. Let's change. Let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about some other supplements instead of just unpacking a therapy session for Eugene right now.
who would have thought LDL could go there?
Guys, today's sponsor is not Athletic Greens. It's not Huel, it's not Element or some other supplement that I don't really believe in, but are paying me an exorbitant fee to talk about. Today's sponsor is me. If you're anything like me, you care about your lifestyle and health, and you want optimal, but you also want convenient, simple, and easy to follow, which is why I made Gambaro. Check it out below for a complete done-for-you, all-in-one system that will cover your workouts, diet, expert coaching from me, and more. Now, back to the chat with Dean. Let's talk a bit more then about, so that was an interesting supplement that's piqued your curiosity. Any other supplements that you're currently using with people? Training supplements?
Yeah.
Like we spoke a bit of alanine. That's something that you use a lot with people.
Look, I don't use it a lot in ours. I mean, it's in a lot of pre-workouts that people choose to use. It's not something I recommend.
Yeah.
Pre-workouts, that is, if they want to use them, they can. It's a really interesting ingredient, beta-alanine.
Totally.
It started out so strong.
Yes,
and
it was such
and then
promising,
it kind of
robust
like just was
research.
like, this
Yeah.
is really not done as much as we expected.
Yeah.
I'm pretty consistent at recommending, just generally speaking, like an NAC, like N-Acetyl-Cysteine.
Okay.
Primarily, again, like I have guys that are using PEDs. So any kind of like strong antioxidant that I can put in to try and offset some of the oxidative stress associated with drug use, I think is advantageous. And it's like a pretty cool supplement. I quite like it. Again, not too expensive.
For the general population person, the regular human who's not enhanced to the gills, NAC. So that, if I remember correctly, that will then be, it's like a precursor to glutathione, which is like the mother antioxidant in the body. That's going to have a lot of benefits for the gen pop person too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like all of these supplements should be set up in a fashion that's like we're trying to like minimize the likelihood of disease or even like acute sickness. Because if we can do that, then we can do a lot more with our lives.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, the mother antioxidant glutathione, if we can keep that at a level that is sufficient to do that, then happy days.
Why is that so important, glutathione? I just know that buzzword of it's so good.
Yeah.
What are these oxidants that we are so against?
these oxidative stresses. Well, isn't it? I mean, they're actually a really interesting group of things. I don't know what they would be technically called. In that there's like the technical term is hormesis. There's a hormetic response to
so it creates
antioxidants.
stress to your body, so you
Like,
fight back.
Some is good, more is better, too much is no good.
Yes.
Like this really like inverted U sort of approach. So, But yeah, I mean, there's a big craze even for injectable glutathione, right, and being on drips
Yes.
and all the rest of it.
Yes.
But you are right, like the whole antioxidant capacity thing. I think it's going to be, if you could think of it maybe in like layman's terms, would be a reduction of aging at a rapid speed, a reduction of general inflammation, which again is maybe like pro-inflammatory sort of like cytokines and all this stuff. Maybe age, it may make you age quicker. So a better overall quality of life, not necessarily quantity of life.
That reminds me of, now you mentioned hormesis. Other hormetic agents people would use curcumin, which has a similar response where it's technically something that creates stress in the body, but that then turns on these anti-inflammatory healing pathways in the body. Do you use that much with people?
Intermittently, I may, or for specific individuals. So again, this is a really cool supplement because I mean it's been shown pretty well, mainly in the elderly, to increase like walking capacity, both in a reduction in pain, but also the time that they can do so via what they believe it to be obviously like an anti-inflammatory. I will not use it significantly in individuals that are otherwise relatively healthy from a joint, tendon, ligament perspective.
Okay.
I say this with hesitation again because my guys use pharmacology. They're kind of like eradicating most things that may inhibit muscle growth, right? Because the hormones do that. But like driving down the inflammatory response may inhibit muscle growth to a degree.
Right.
So like maybe we don't want to go heavy dose use of these when we're really trying to maximize hypertrophy. So in growth phases.
Yes.
But in a contest prep, when we're talking about muscle retention, muscle growth isn't the goal. If they're a little bit broken and sore because there's less fluid around the joint, less body fat around the joint, then maybe this is a good time to use it. Or similarly, if you've got an individual that has like chronic inflammatory issues with their knees or their elbows that they can't fix because they're not doing the good stuff, maybe we can plug in a supplement like we were talking about before. And being able to train in less pain is certainly better than not being able to train because of pain.
Yes.
So even if curcumin mildly dampened the hypertrophic response, not to the degree that not training would. So I think it's maybe advantageous in those instances.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing to like the ice bath, isn't it? Where everyone's saying it's so healthy, but then hang on, it can blunt, and it has been shown to blunt hypertrophy significantly if it's done like immediately in that acute phase. But in all honesty, in the grand scheme of things, is that a humongous issue for most people? Probably not a huge concern. It's not going to stop you from all muscle building. And if it does help you in the grand scheme of your personal context, actually train or move outside of pain and have other health benefits, it's like, hey, I'll take the 10% less gains if it means I just feel better for the other 23 hours of the day.
I mean, you've got to consider that, right, too.
Yeah.
Feel terrible for most of the day just to grow as much as you possibly could.
Yeah.
I think, that saying of getting lost, lost the forest for the trees, getting lost in the forest for the trees, whatever it is, never remember. That is a classic case of the fitness industry where they see one particular mechanism of action that might suggest that there's a problem like this, like ice baths and curcumin or other anti-inflammatories or antioxidants.
Yes.
And therefore you should not have any. Like, I don't know if that's not the result we're looking for. That's not the answer.
Yeah. And that's, the whole talk about mechanism, a lot of supplements will have research where there is mechanistic data showing that in theory this supplement could do this, but it's lacking in actual proof where it actually does it have an effect. Or even in the tests where they use it in human studies, it does nothing. I can't think of anything that comes to mind for that, but I know that's like a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say they're very common. I feel like there should be a lot that I can remember too, but off the top of my head, I don't have any either.
It's a thing, people. It's a thing. Trust us. We're on camera with podcast microphones.
I mean, maybe berberine to a degree.
Really? Berberine?
But it depends what you're arguing for.
Okay.
Actually, you know what I would say is probably the best ones for these that is difficult to elucidate in real populations is probiotics. I think mechanistically they make sense.
Yes. For the good bacteria replenished.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like we don't really know what good and bad bacteria is. Let me just quickly preface this. I'm by no means a gut expert. But like from the people that I at least trust their opinions of that do this well, like good gut health is dependent on where you even are situated in the world.
Yes. I think we had this discussion before, you and me, ages ago.
So like, what is good? I don't really know. Like it might be good, it might be bad. So then like probiotics, like, is that the right strain? I'm not sure. It makes sense. But then when you look at some of the stuff like post-surgery interventions of probiotic use for people that have had like poor GI health, just returning to just doing their normal life 9 times out of 10 works just as effectively as using probiotics. So it's like, does it?
Yeah.
But then I'll have people that swear by them, you know? So like, I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah.
So,
And that's where I guess with some of these supplements, it's as long as there's no clear evidence that it's going to do harm, it may be a case of, look, if you can afford it
yeah.
and it may give you some benefit, you just got to test it out and just see if it works, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I've got a better one in the fat loss industry.
Okay.
Oral L-carnitine.
Right. Yes.
Mechanistically sounds awesome.
Yes. Tell me a bit about that, because I know carnitine's a huge, you see that in all the fat loss agents, energy production.
Yeah.
Tell us about carnitine, how it should work, and then in practice, what you see and what you do instead.
Well, so yeah, like mechanistically, L-carnitine is the transporter of fatty acids from where they get broken down into the cell mitochondria where they get burnt.
Yes.
So theory being, if we can increase the levels of L-carnitine within the system, then we can drive up the efficiency of fatty acid delivery into the cell to be burnt.
Yes.
Sounds awesome.
Yes.
You know, or maybe we could even use it to decrease, the rate of glycogen depletion. Because again, we're like preferencing like fatty acid use. Sounds amazing. In the research, it's like they take L-carnitine and they don't really see any kind of upregulation in the amount of actual available carnitine to do this.
Yeah.
Because the oral bioavailability is so terrible.
Yes.
So it's terrible for one. 2, mechanistically, it is reliant upon usually 2 things in order for it to be maximally absorbed. One is going to be muscle contraction, so it has to be around exercise, or actually injected technically, or it requires insulin-mediated delivery. So then you have to have a ton of carbohydrates.
Yep.
So now we're kind of like thinking like, well, where do you put it? How do you get it to work?
Yeah.
If we're also dosing carbohydrates and trying to maximize fatty acid use, like it's yeah.
It's a bit of a mess. Like I remember John Meadows would always talk to me about injectable carnitine in the past. I can't remember if he would also time it with insulin. Not recommending insulin use, people. Don't do that unless you're under the advisement of a doctor or, I guess, coach.
Yes. Of which it's only just advice.
Yes, it's just entertainment purposes, people. We're not advising that at all. But is that something you've used in the past, injectable carnitine?
Yeah.
And do you see better success with clients?
It is one of the ones that we've talked about now where I'd say, look, this is likely causing no harm. It's kind of annoying to use because it's a daily thing.
Yeah.
It's an injectable. They do enough of that.
Yeah.
If you want to use this, you can. It may afford us a slightly better result in regards to driving up the efficiency of fatty acid use. There's maybe also some research that suggests that it might increase androgen receptor sensitivity.
Yeah.
But again, like that sounds awesome. But like, do you really need your androgen receptors to be that much more sensitive? And to what percentage is it? You know, I'm pretty sure they're flooded with androgens. Like, I don't know if sensitivity is an issue.
Yeah.
Saturation is probably more of an issue.
And also, honestly, even if you weren't of your clientele, someone like me, it's like, as you say, how much benefit will I really get from a slightly more sensitive androgen receptor? Or slightly like 5-10% more testosterone if I was taking some random testosterone boosting supplement that somehow magically actually worked.
Yes.
Is that really going to make a big benefit? I think it's overblown. Like I say in this fitness industry, it's people take this little data and they run with it, don't they?
Yeah, it's like buzzword and excitement, you know. Androgen receptor.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Definitely want to upregulate that.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, though, I do remember reading some stuff back in the past about L-carnitine, L-tartrate specifically, though.
Okay.
But it had nothing to do with fat loss. And it was all to do with decreasing perceived pain during exercise.
Right. Okay.
So you could do more work.
Right.
So then it was kind of like, all right, well, maybe you might get some benefits here in regards to, like actual like energy use, like preferentially using fatty acid, but you'll also get a reduction in perceived pain while you're training. So why not consider the tartrate version?
Absolutely.
Or the acetyl version.
Yeah, for more the brain.
For cognition.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And this is like where it really does, like all of these supplements now we've been speaking about the last however long it's been, once we got past the pro health stuff, it's more just like, this stuff, it's promising. You're going to see so many videos, articles, very biased research talking about the benefits of this carnitine for your brain or for your heart or for whatever, but there really isn't enough data or evidence to say that we should be using this stuff and that we can recommend it. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it though. If you've got the resources and the care and desire to use them, do it if you want.
Yeah. But just try and test and measure with one thing at a time, I guess. That's the other problem, right? Most of the time people are just throwing in
Yeah.
an entire collection of things, and nobody really knows, you know. Mm-hmm. It's like throwing shit at a wall and hope it sticks. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Is there anything that you see people using a lot of at the moment that, I guess Carnitine might be on, but anything like that where it's very popular and it's just a waste of time?
I'm not subjected to individuals using test boosters.
Yep.
But
of course.
all of them,
Yeah.
you know, all of them for sure are a waste of time.
Mm-hmm. What makes them a waste of time? So things like Tonkat Ali, Fedoja agrestis. What else is there? Other test boosters. You guys call them test boosters. They're all the rage.
Yeah, I mean, you can't shift, even if you can shift the needle like a decent percentage, that percentage shift is not going to do anything for you in regards to muscle growth. I also...
How come?
Well, this is the interesting thing. Like, I wonder how much testosterone itself has an effect on genuine muscle growth when within normal physiological ranges outside of genetics. And I say this is 100% anecdotal. Mm-hmm. I say this because I've on more than one occasion had friends that have otherwise been essentially castrate level testosterone, but have had significantly more muscle than other individuals. They've also managed to get their partners at the time pregnant. So like testosterone wasn't the rate limiting thing on their capacity to grow tissue. It certainly changed their vitality and energy and libido and things like that. So when these individuals eventually ended up on things like TRT and still stayed within normative ranges, they felt a lot better. But they were going from 3 and 4 nmols per deciliter up to the top end reference range of 30.
So
we're
10
talking
times the amount.
Huge amounts.
Still the natural range.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if you've got somebody who's sitting at 25 and 28 and 29, like you're only going to get them up to the 30 to 35 as well. And like the shift in percentage there is so insignificant that I don't think a lot of people would notice it. So maybe like case dependent, we could maybe say that, like, you know, I mean, there's some pretty crazy things out there these days that people are trying to do to get their testosterone levels up to the bare minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. Stunning the ball sack.
Stunning and icing.
At the same time?
I don't know if that's possible.
Sounds like a good time.
Icing the ball sack is one.
I remember seeing this as underwear. You can put like little patches in.
Okay.
Little ice pouches designed to...
Pre-workout ball ice.
Yeah.
Ice balling, and then some post-workout anti-inflammatories.
Yeah, this is the most optimal testosterone boost to bump up your levels by fucking 1.
Yeah, and for what benefit is the question. I think that's the thing that people have to ask themselves with supplement, for what benefit, you know? And maybe at what cost?
Yeah.
Because if there's a health cost,
of course,
you need to consider that. There's obviously a financial cost.
Of course.
But for what benefit? It's like maybe it gets me an extra couple of percent. But what is that couple of percent in actual tissue or in actual performance or whatever it may be? And you'll end up with very little things in your cupboard.
Honestly, that is a mentality that's cleaned out my cupboard when it comes to supplements. Like I take a magnesium B vitamin compound every single day, and that's about it. Everything else is like I used to take, like I said, so much stuff. I was like, for what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I travel a lot right now. You used to travel a lot too. So I have to consider like, what's going to go in my suitcase? And for me, it's always vitamin D. As I'm white. I'm white as hell.
Yes, you are. I've noticed that.
I'm progressively getting whiter. It's a bad thing. Usually, in my vitamin D it has a K2.
Yes.
Which I really like because I still use performance-enhancing drugs. So advantageous to maybe prevent some of that plaque accumulation in the walls. And then I will also just do a basic zinc. And that's pretty much me covered. Those are like my 3 go-tos. And then depending on the quality of fish oil available to me, I will do that in a country. Yeah. Because sometimes it's just not that easy to get in certain countries.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's a great standpoint for us. Dean McKillop's supplement stack on the road.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
No, pleasure.
Thank you.